Sasol's half-year profit has taken a knock. The fuel producer's headline earnings per share fell 34% in the 6 months to end December. That's due to weaker oil and petrochemical prices. Higher costs also weighed. An interim dividend of R2 per share has been declared. This is less than half the previous period's payout. Libstar is expecting a profit bump. The food producer has forecast an increase in annual headline earnings per share of up to 28.5%. That's thanks to largely due to insurance proceeds, which helped counter higher borrowing costs. The group received insurance proceeds of 120 million rand in relation to the Denny Mushrooms Shongweni fire incident, while full-year net finance costs on interest-bearing debt rose by 58.5 million rand. Libstar's full-year results will be published on the 15th of March. Ellies expects to sink deeper into the red. The electronics group says its headline loss per share could more than double to over 12 cents. Ellies has not elaborated on that forecast, but more details should be provided when the firm opens its books at the end of this month. And South Africa should get off the Financial Action Task Force grey list by the scheduled date of June 2025. That's according to Treasury Deputy Director General Ismail Momoniat. The comment follows a task force plenary meeting in Paris last week. Momoniat, who attended the discussion, says it was a good meeting. South Africa has now completed 5 of the 22 actions required by the FATF and had made a good progress on the 15 of the remaining 17. The FATF has acknowledged this progress but says South Africa still has some way to go. Further afield, US automaker General Motors unveiled its luxury electric Cadillac Lyric in France, an expansion of its market in Europe after returning last year, and a test of whether online-only sales will attract wealthy car buyers. Let's take a look at this package report for more.
General Motors is slowly driving back into Europe. On Monday, the auto giant returned to the French market with the launch of its Cadillac Lyric luxury vehicle in the country. Online-only sales are due to begin in March, testing whether high-end car buyers are willing to purchase their vehicles entirely without meeting a dealer. A Paris showroom is, however, in the plans. The move comes after GM announced late last year that it was relaunching sales in Switzerland. That was the first step in a planned return to the continent as an all-electric brand. The firm sold its European Opel and Vauxhall units back in 2017. Now GM says other electric models will follow the Lyric. French pricing for the car hasn't been set, but in Switzerland it starts at over $93,000. The best-selling EV in France last year was Tesla's Model Y SUV, which starts at around half that sum. GM is targeting the luxury end of the market though, saying that is where it sees the fastest growth. Germany is now on its European hit list, with sales there to start by year-end.
Now, EU-based farmers have had a rough start to the year, with many taking to the streets as they strike against the bloc's green standards, which could lead to higher costs and unfair competition. Here's our reporter Ndaleng Lechela with more of the detail.
That's right, Zinati. And in response to the strike action, EU agriculture ministers are meeting in Brussels. They'll be discussing the bloc's agricultural policies amid tensions between farmers and governments. And joining us now with more is DW correspondent Chiponda Chimbelu. Chiponda, thanks so much for your time today. Now let's get straight into it. I've just read that farmers are protesting outside the EU headquarters. Just take us through the latest news from that front.
Thanks for having me. Well, the latest is that Belgian farmers will be protesting not too far from where the EU agricultural ministers are meeting in Brussels. And Polish farmers are holding a protest in Warsaw. Now, in recent months, we've also seen farmer protests across the rest of the continent. Farmers in Eastern European countries, including Poland and Hungary, say that cheap Ukrainian exports, especially wheat, are making their produce less competitive on the market. Now, in an effort to support the Ukrainian economy after Russia's invasion, the EU suspended import duties and other restrictions for imports from Ukraine in June 2022. But cheap Ukrainian grain exports have led to protests by governments, farmers and truckers in neighboring countries. In Slovakia, that is, Hungary, Poland, and Romania. And here in Germany, farmers have been protesting against government plans to cut subsidies for diesel fuel. Now, French farmers have also protested against similar plans by their government, in addition to low food prices and an EU plan for a trade agreement with 4 South American countries.
So we've seen these protests play out through the region. What I'd like to know is, how are EU lawmakers responding?
Well, in France, we've seen President Macron promising to establish a minimum price for each product to ensure that farmers are able to earn enough money regardless of market prices. And in Brussels, the European Commission has announced concessions. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said Brussels would pull back plans for a new law that would have forced farmers to reduce pesticide use by 50%. Now, these protests come at a crucial time. The European Parliament election is set to be held in early June, so politicians at the EU and national levels are scrambling to come up with responses to ensure that the farmer protests do not hurt their parties when Europeans head to the polls. Meanwhile, farmers in Europe believe that agriculture is not appreciated or valued on the continent. Now, that's why we're seeing them calling for more exceptions and fewer rules.
Chiponda, before I let you go, what can we expect moving forward?
Well, there have been structural challenges in the European agricultural system, and smaller and medium-sized farms in particular are the ones that are really feeling the squeeze. The number of farms has tumbled in Europe by 1/3 since 2005. But the amount of land farmed hasn't. Now that means that there are now fewer and bigger farms than there used to be 20 years ago. The shrinking number of farms has something to do with profitability. So just how profitable it is to run a farm here in Europe. It has become especially harder for smaller and medium-sized farmers to be competitive. Meanwhile, climate protection, emission reduction, and structural change are also essential in agriculture. Now, the question is, how can all of that be done without upsetting the whole system? Too many concessions by the EU would hamper efforts to fight climate change. So it will be interesting to see how European lawmakers strike the balance between giving farmers some of what they want and ensuring that Brussels maintains its net zero goals.
We'll keep an eye out on how everything develops on that end. Thanks for your time and insights. That was Chiponda Chimbelu from Deutsche Welle.